Welcome to the Starzology Astrology Podcast. I am your host, Alison Price, and I'm here again with my co-host, Arwynne O'Neill.
Hi, Alison. It's great to be here again.
It's lovely to have you once more. Now, in this episode, we're going to be talking about angular houses.
Yes.
We're starting a houses series almost, and we're going to start dissecting them one by one. But in this particular episode, we're going to group them into angular houses and talk about these four particular angular houses, which are quite important in a chart.
Yeah. So there's angular, there's succedent, and there's cadent houses.
Right.
So they all mean something different, and the angular houses are the ones, surprisingly, on the angles. So that's...
Perhaps you'd like to explain what the angles are.
Absolutely. So the first house is the beginning of the ascendant. That's the first angle is the ascendant. Then the fourth house is the IC, which stands for, now pronunciation, how do you?
I say homunculi. How do you say it?
There you go. I mean, I try to avoid it, so I say IC, but it's...
Oh, I see. That's what you do.
I suppose. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. But it means it's the signifier of the home. And it's your base kind of thing. And then the seventh house is the descendant, which is the beginning of the seventh house, which is partnerships and marriage, but also business partnerships, the house of the other. And then the 10th house, of course, which is the midheaven or the MC. And that is the career, the vocation, the creative output, how the world sees you, your face to the world.
That's right.
Yeah.
So there's four angles in every chart.
Yeah.
Ascendant, IC, descendant, and midheaven. And they'll be at different positions for everybody. Each one will have a different position, really.
And at this point, we should also sort of interject that we are using Placidus houses. If you're using whole sign or something like that.
You're in the wrong podcast. Okay, I'm sorry now. I do Placidus. What do you do?
Yes, I do as well. I toyed with the idea of doing Coke houses for a while. And there's a pun in there somewhere. But no, it was only because when I read some books in my beginning of understanding astrology, some of them were very much on the Coke houses. And so I was like, oh, maybe I should. But they're only a tiny bit different from Placidus. They're not as common. And there were just a couple of little things that were different about them that kind of annoyed me. And I was like, nah.
Oh, yeah.
It's always about your own chart, isn't it? When you're first learning. It's like you see your houses in one system, and then everything gets kind of shifted slightly around, and you're like, oh, no, that's not me.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, when I was training for astrology and learning everything, of course, we had to go through all the houses and know all the calculations.
Yeah.
And back in the day, you had to know all this by hand. Ugh. And but the point being, the way I put it out these days is that I think, as I understand it, 85% of people at the moment use Placidus, and the other 15% are using equal or whole sign or what have you. Yeah. But it's much like when you're driving a vehicle. If you're on petrol or gas, as they say, that's 85% of the population. Yeah. The other 15 are on diesel.
There you go.
But you're still going to get there.
Yeah.
But you can't put. It's a different way of looking at things.
Absolutely. So. That's a great way of looking at it.
Yeah, so in the Placidus system, the MC and the IC are the cusps of the 4th and 10th houses.
Which, for our purposes, and also just anyone who's starting out in astrology, does make it easier. In those other house systems where your MC might be, at like 12 degrees of something, it's going to be floating in the middle of the 9th or 10th house. Who needs that? That's, it's much easier to just have it begin the 10th house, begin the 4th house. Yeah, exactly. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one day, actually, in a different podcast, we are going to get into house systems, and that will be a really interesting one because it is a debate. People get sort of...
Oh, it's a hot topic, isn't it?
Crazy about it.
Hot topic.
Yeah. Much debate. Yeah. But that's for another day. For now, Placidus houses. And so those angles, the angular houses, that's why they're angular.
So tell us again, what are the numbers of the angular houses?
1, 4, 7, and 10.
Okay, all right. So for anyone who's pretty new, then we're focusing on these 4 houses because they're more important than the other succeeding and cadent houses.
And if you're just new at looking at a chart, like the circular chart, that would be literally like the west and east and north and south points of a compass. Those are just the angles.
So these houses, the angular houses, come off the angle. They're butted up and they come from the angle, so that's why they're called angular.
Yeah.
And
the houses are numbered counterclockwise.
Yes,
of course.
Yes.
So the first house is on what would be like the west coast of the chart, so to speak. So starting on the first house, that is the angle of the ascendant. the first house represents. Let's just go through them.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. So let's have a chat then about the first house.
Yeah, I mean, the first house it represents you, your personality, your behavior. The sun might not be on the ascendant, but a lot of the time when you don't know someone's birth time, it is frequently convenient to time their birth to coincide so that their sun is on the ascendant. That's just how, with famous people, a lot of time you coincide it with their MC, because that would put it at the top of the chart. But with just a civilian or, whatever, sometimes it's, if you don't know their birth time, and you never can know if it's just a mystery, a lot of the time we'll just put that right at the beginning of the first house so that their sun and their ascendant will be conjunct.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that, and that is that usually if back in the day, we're in labor all night. As dawn broke, they gave birth, and the release came.
Yeah.
So that they generally, people back in the day would have their suns below the horizontal and in the first house.
Yeah, that's true. The number of people born in the middle of the night, probably back in the day, it was a little more common.
Yes.
But nowadays, because people go into the hospital to give birth, they are not usually giving birth at home unless there's some terrible power outage or emergency.
Yes.
Or in a cab, like if you're on a sitcom, this will happen. There's always that episode. But most of the time these days, people are born between dawn and 2 in the afternoon at the very latest, because that's just what time births are scheduled to happen.
Yeah, and this has been since about 1980, and there are statistics on this. And just as a side note, that this is creating many new people, young people, the millennials and the Gen Zs, frequently have their sun in the 10th house. Yeah. And this is where this entitlement keeps coming in.
Yeah, and social media, where everyone feels like they're famous.
Because they've got it in the 11th house.
Yeah, or 10th house. Amazing. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have my sun in the 10th house, and I was born a little before social media, let's say that. But I like to think that I made it convenient for my mother. I didn't have to have her in labor all night. I was being considerate. She went into labor like right after her husband came back from doing his, he was delivering papers at the time. And he came home and it was like, oh, you're in labor. Let's go. They went off to the hospital, and I was born like just a bit before noon. So,
wow. So interesting. We'll get to that 10th house.
Exactly. But so first house is the personality. It's your individuality. So any house or any planets that you have in the first house are going to be amplified. That is going to be like, regardless of whether they're conjunct to your ascendant, or if they're conjunct to your ascendant, that's obviously like even more of a spotlight on them. But anything in the first house is really going to be amplified. It's going to have a spotlight on it. It's going to really add to the character, the flavor of who you are as a person. Do you have anything in the first house?
I actually do. I have 3 planets in the first house.
Amaze balls. I don't have anything in the first house. So let's talk about you.
Okay, well, why not, since we're here? I've got Mercury's that can join the ascendant in the first house, hence the podcast and all the rest of it. Then I have Uranus in the first house and the Sun. So
and they're all in Leo.
They're all in Leo. And this is what people see. It's just... it's just coming through.
So it's the Sun, it's Mercury, the house of, or the Sun of communication, and Uranus, the sign
the
of
astrology. Yeah, she's the astrologer, and so on. Yeah,
I love it.
And I've always had this theory about angular planets that when planets are in an angular house, their energy is available to you from birth. So if you have these planets, you can tap into them and use them straight away. Yeah. Whereas succeeding and cadent planets, not so much. You've got to work at them as you get more mature. That's kind of a good thing. Yeah.
Total sense. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and you've got nothing in the first house?
No.
Oh, gosh. So.
Sorry. I mean, I've got maybe some weird things. Like, I think...
Weird things?
I don't know. I think maybe my part of fortune might be the first house. I know we've talked about the part of fortune. I should know this, but it's not one of the things that I think about that much. Yeah.
Okay, so let's just talk about then an empty house. What do we do when the house is empty? We look to the ruler of the house, and in your case, it would be
Mars or Pluto, because I have Scorpio rising.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So that would then give us information about your personality.
Yeah,
basically.
And I've got Mars in the 7th and Pluto in the 11th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's coming through there.
Yeah.
So I think the first house too, it's what you look like, it's how you walk, how tall you are, your complexion. And to my mind, it's always when you leave your house and you go out the front door, it's showtime, and you're showing your ascendant as you're walking the streets and going about your business.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're in the comfort of your own home, sitting around in your bare feet, you're not presenting the ascendant. That mask is not being worn at home. So it's only really as you go outside into the public domain.
Yeah, interesting. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, if anyone is a budding astrologer, what you want to look at when you collect the charts of your friends, as you will, is who has things in the first house, and does that resonate with you? Does that make sense when you look at your friend group? Do you see the more outgoing people tend to have things in the first house? You obviously are a very outgoing, probably sort of Leo person, as you say. What you see is what you get. And my partner, he's a Scorpio, but he has Libra rising, and he has his Sun and Mercury and Neptune all in the first house.
Okay.
So the communication, the creativity.
But so he's presenting as Libra. He's hooking them in, luring them in with his social skills, and then comes the Scorpio sting in the tail. Yes,
absolutely.
Interesting. Yeah. So how you present is shown by your ascendant.
Yeah.
And a first house thing as well. And also, if you're going to read your horoscopes in the newspapers, read your ascendant.
I absolutely always do that.
Yeah.
For you, it's easy. It's all Leo, but I've got to read the Virgo and the Scorpio.
Yeah.
And the Libra, of course, because my partner has Libra rising. So
there you go. Where does it end?
Where does it end? Exactly.
All right. So let's have a look at the fourth house then. That's the next one.
Absolutely. So the fourth house is the house of family. It's on, as you say, the IC or
Imam Coli.
There you go. It signifies your home, your security, your family, your early childhood, and the things in life that served as a foundation for. So the fourth house is connected with your either your mother or your father. It's traditionally the less dominant of the parents.
Yes.
So the 10th house is the other family house, and that would typically be the parent who was there more, which often indicates the mother, but not always, certainly. And so in my chart in particular, for example, my fourth house cusp is Aquarius. My dad's an Aquarius. And so, and also my mother, they were divorced and my mother had custody. So that would make perfect sense for me in my chart that my dad is represented by the fourth house.
Okay, interesting.
And my mother,
Okay, interesting. All right.
Yeah. But not everybody. Obviously, not everyone has a mother and a father. Some people have two parents that are the same gender. It doesn't matter. We're not talking about gender. We're talking about like your dominant parent, and that could be whomever. So this the fourth house would be the non-dominant parent, but it also is about your childhood. So frequently that would be like, what type of childhood did you have? And for me, interestingly, Aquarius is not just about, the sign of my dad, which it is, but it's also sort of an untraditional, communal, kind of irreverent, innovative sign. And I did have a very kind of weird childhood. As I think I've mentioned a few times, we did live in a school bus briefly. So we had a weird, kind of nomadic, kind of moving around a lot. And I went to strange little private performing arts high school and went to art college and things like that. So just a strange little childhood. What about you? What's on your fourth house?
I've actually got Libra, so that's all just hunky-dory and delightful.
Yeah.
And the Moon and Neptune are there. So definitely my mother is represented in the fourth house.
Yeah.
She was there cooking, cleaning, sewing and knitting my clothes.
Yeah.
I mean, I had handmade clothes until I was 13.
Wow.
And we didn't buy clothes from shops back then. So everything, even down to the unmentionables. But anyway.
Wow. I had quite a bit of that too, but it was more of like the hippie sort of thing of, we go to thrift stores or we learn to, kind of sew and make our own things.
But I can look back at my childhood and say that I had a great childhood and it was all hunky-dory, nothing there.
Yeah.
Frequently you find that if people have a challenging childhood or whatever went down at home, they can rewrite their personal history, which is your fourth house, and almost their backstory gets redone so that they are then presenting themselves as an adult from a different standpoint.
Yeah.
So they're not being, if you had difficult issues or something like that, they would then rewrite their history and say, oh, no, I didn't do that. We come from here and my family this and that.
Yeah.
And they rewrite and will put it forward. So whatever your backdrop is and your background is shown from that fourth house.
Interesting.
And how you take it forward. And when people say, oh, where are you from? And they say, oh, they're rather, I'm from New York or whatever. And when really it was some little village in the back end of beyond,
Yeah, totally. Upstate.
Well, I don't know what that would be, but
Right.
to present themselves with a better backdrop to move through life with.
And who doesn't do that to some degree?
Well,
I mean,
right.
also the way memory works, we don't even know when we're rewriting history, because the more we retell a story, the more distorted it gets.
Yeah.
This is something we've learned through, the wonders of neuroscience over the last 10, 20 years.
Exactly.
The more we tell a story, the more it becomes a story. The less it is actually a memory, and the more it is something that we've crafted. Even if it was something that was a shared memory, people talk about like events like 9/11 or whatever that they lived through, and the more that they tell the story of where they were when such and such happened, it becomes distorted over time the more they tell it, which if it's your own childhood, how often do you explain the story of where you grew up? Where are you from? What were your parents like? That whole thing.
Yeah, so whatever planets you've got in your fourth house will modify how you present your backstory, because if I meet you for the first time, I don't know whether you're from New York or Chicago or wherever.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I don't really care, but one just tries to pigeonhole people into some kind of category.
Absolutely.
And say, oh yeah, no, I did this and that, and my father was a fireman. And you think, oh, okay, and you've got something.
Yeah.
Whereas one wants to have this postage stamp thing about who is this person and what's their thing. Okay, fine, I know who they are. But really, we have no clue.
No.
And you see this as a consulting astrologer. They'll tell you, oh, blah, 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 blah. And there you can see that there was this issue. There was issues at home and trauma in a lot of cases that shows. But they gloss over and rewrite their story going forward.
And it's interesting, too, anyone who's done any kind of research into their lineage or their backstory, you will hear all kinds of fascinating things in the telling of these stories that go back generation after generation. The stories that your family tells about themselves. And it's frequently a rewriting of history. And we were this, we were that, we were from here, but not really. We were from actually this place. And,
exactly. You see it a lot with the immigrants. They change their name from whatever, long bottom to something more acceptable or something. Yes. Or a cultural name that is no longer appropriate will be changed, and that's part of fourth house.
Oh my gosh, I have a hilarious example from just earlier this morning. My mother and I were talking about something to do with, and I can't remember what exactly it was. Somehow her grandmother came up in thing, and my mother was struggling for a way to say that they didn't have a lot of money, and I said, poor, like George Carlin, like just the shortest word, is frequently the least politically correct, but it's the correct one. And she said, oh, no, my grandmother always said, we aren't poor, we're temporarily broke. We're just like, what?
I know.
And I don't come from any kind of like displaced royalty. That was just like literally they were from Texas or Tennessee or someplace in the South. They moved to California, and no, we're temporarily broke. We're not poor.
Exactly.
We're not what trash.
Yes, exactly. We're not unemployed. We're between engagements.
Yeah.
And and go for it. Why not? Why not put yourself forward well?
Yeah, absolutely.
And rewrite your history and whatever, because we're all trying to get through life that has changed very much from when we were kids. So it is different.
Now it's called social media. It's called Instagram.
Exactly. Whereas if I'd stayed living in the same village I did where I lived and I was born and everybody knew you, you couldn't do that. No, but now because we're all nomadic and move around.
But now there's Facebook, and also you will stay in touch with everyone until you die, unless you literally unfriend them.
Yes.
You can't reinvent yourself anymore. That's a weird thing.
That's the skill of reinvention.
Yeah.
Yes. So really, it's only if you've got planets in the fourth house. I think people go down this road, and for many reasons, and why not? Yeah. If you've got a difficult name, they're going to smooth it into something more smooth.
Totally.
I mean, if I married some guy who had an awkward name, I wouldn't take it on. I'd change it and polish it up,
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the fourth house.
That's the fourth house, absolutely.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to our third angular house, which is the seventh house.
Yes. This is the house of the descendant. Not to be confused with the house of the rising sun. No. This isn't that kind of song.
No.
The seventh house is the house of marriage, unions, other people, associations, and contracts. So business partnerships, marriage partnerships, other, just other people.
Yeah. It really is, back in the day, it was who you married, and because if you weren't married, it was a struggle.
Yeah.
Nowadays, of course, it's not the same thing.
Right. No.
But it does show who your serious partners are.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is the traditional house of Libra. So it's the, when you do the houses around the thing. Yeah, that's the house of Libra. So marriage. It's also about your contracts, as I said, associations, and open enemies, which is an interesting thing.
I love that.
I've always loved the house of open enemies. It's almost like that would be a great name for like a bar. House of open enemies.
Yes.
What's happening there?
So open enemies generally come forward when, say, for instance, you get married. Bob and Margaret get married, and then after 10 years, they decide to chuck in the towel, and they're getting divorced.
And the divorce turns into this horrible, ugly thing.
And that's your open enemy. They know your weaknesses.
Yep.
They know what to tell their lawyer to screw you over about, and that's an open enemy.
Right.
You know who's got it in for you, and definitely you'll see it with when you get divorced.
Yeah, and the same with contracts too. If there's a business that's breaking up or being sued, everybody knows everything's on the table.
There's no secret enemies with this house at all. You absolutely can face your accuser, technically.
Yeah.
And they know your weaknesses, and that's the trick with this particular house.
Yeah.
I used to work with a guy, and he used to say, though he was married, he said, never tell your wife what you're telling the tax man, because they'll use it against you in 10 years' time. So clearly he had another agenda.
Right. Yeah. And so the seventh house, we can talk more about open enemies, but traditionally it's about the partnership, and it's about what
you're looking for.
Yeah, what you're looking for, the type of mate that you are attracted to. And this doesn't just mean that we have Taurus on the descendant. That means you're attracted to Taurus people, but it could mean that. Yeah. But there could be a Taurian quality, and of course, obviously, I'm just using myself as an example. I have Taurus on the descendant. We'll talk about yours too. We should actually talk about some that we have no association with, because I know
it's a conversation.
Some people feel like they're left out, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, so like, for example, what is a Taurus type? A Taurus type is good with their hands. They're good with money. They're a rock solid thing to cling to. They're someone you can bring home to the parents. Yeah. And someone who'll maybe put dinner on the table for you.
Well, clearly, especially if you're such a picky eater.
Or just can't be allowed in the kitchen, or else you'll set things on fire. Oh. But enough about me. Where is what's on your seventh house?
I've got Aquarius there, but there's no planets in it.
Yeah.
So
you're like an innovative, offbeat kind of.
Yeah. So my husband had the exact degree on his ascendant, so we were directly opposite ascendant descendants.
Wow!
And he was just what I was looking for. He was just crazy and odd and different. And
was it love at first sight?
I love at first bite.
Actually, honestly, me too. That's amazing.
Yes.
I love it. That's awesome.
But we just, because that's Leo, your boots and all. You're not half in a relationship. Yeah. You're either in or you're not. Yeah. There's no messing about.
Cheers
and it worked well. Mm-hmm. But and it was, as I say, it was civilized and polite, and everything had to be kind of tidy. And I'm not the tidiest person, but.
We're in your house right now. I beg to differ, but maybe you clean up before I come.
Well, I'll be honest and tell you, I got the vacuum out today because I thought, one's coming. I've got to vacuum. Finally, and I thought it's such a dog. I can't stand the damn thing. I'm going to get something else.
Vacuum cleaners are almost as bad as printers, but we won't go.
It's like a flat tire. It's just such an annoying little thing to have to deal with. Anyway. Yeah. But enough of that. So this is your partner. This is who you're looking for. And actually the degree of the descendant, whatever degree that is, in your case, it's 4 degrees Taurus. Yeah. That is representing exactly who you're looking for. Yeah. Your other half. He completes me because you are the ascendant and he is the descendant and he completes you.
I just happen to have Mars conjuncted.
Yeah. So anyone who's even got their sun at 4 degrees Taurus is going to make a connection to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's great.
I have enough Taurus friends that it's very, very likely that a lot of them are there. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So you've got that combination going on there. And I've always had Aquarian friends and partners, and there's no, it's just easier. Yeah. It's just easier to deal with Aquarians as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. No, it's interesting too. I've got a bunch of Aquarius friends, and a lot of them are from childhood.
Yeah.
Like 3 or 4 of my best friends in childhood were Aquarians, and that's right there on my IC.
Exactly.
They're just right there. They would come home with me after school, and my mother would be like, "How many children do I have?"
Yeah. Well,
they're here because you're the cool mom.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. Yeah. So also something I want to say about if you've got multiple planets in your 7th house and the way they line up towards the descendant are indications of who you're likely to marry.
Oh, interesting.
So say you've got Mars, Venus, and the Moon in your seventh house.
Wow, yeah.
Technically, you could say as an astrologer that there's potential there for 3 marriages or 3 super serious relationships. The first guy will be the Mars person, the second guy will be the Venus person, the third one will be the lunar person.
Right.
So if you have 5 planets in your 7th house, you are likely to have, yes,
your house runneth over.
5 marriages, and the focus and all the energy in your life goes towards these partnerships and these marriages.
Yeah.
And they are indications of what type of person they were. In your particular case, you've only got the 1 planet, so we assume that it's a red-blooded guy and that's who you got, or who you would have had previously as well, but it's only just the 1 person now.
Yeah. It's interesting. I remember, not to like diverge into this, but I did have a tarot reading when I was like 12 or 13. This is like right in that whole like Linda Goodman's love signs era for me. Yeah. And, love was like the most important thing in my life. Just the idea of like this perfect love. I read lots of romance novels, and this tarot reader told me, I see, or palm reader. I'm so sorry. Palm reader. She told me that she looks at my like marriage lines and she says, I see many little loves, but one major love, just one deep major love in the middle of your life. And I'm like, all right.
The love of your life. And there it is. Yeah. And you might have dabbled beforehand, but finally you settle on the one. Yeah. But if you've got an empty 7th house, such as I do, it just doesn't mean you're not going to get married, clearly.
Of course
but
not,
you go to the ruler of that sign and see what type of person is it. In this case, it was Uranus. And yes, I married a Uranian. There's no question about it.
Yeah, empty houses. That we should actually talk about that a bit, because empty houses. I mean, I have nothing in the 1st house. If you have nothing in the 7th house, don't worry. It doesn't mean
you're not going to get married.
For the youngness out there, don't worry. Or more importantly, if you have nothing in the 10th house, which we'll get to later, it does not mean you will not
have a career,
be famous, be at the top of whatever your game is.
But if you do have planets in these houses, you focus on those energies.
Yeah.
So that's the thing.
It comes more naturally, and that's just something coming naturally versus that you have to work for it.
Great. Yeah. So watch out for those multiple planetary in the 7th house, because that's what it's telling you.
Yeah.
And especially if you're marrying some guy and you're his first wife and he's got 5 planets in the 7th house.
Ooh, yeah.
Tread
you might
carefully.
Want to change your hair color every couple of years just
Tread
to keep
carefully.
it interesting.
Gosh, we've got some good ideas, Arwynne.
Right?
Okay, so now we finally reached the 4th angular house. The top of the chart, the 10th house, the midheaven. Yeah. It's all happening at the top.
Yeah. So whereas the 4th house is the home and where your base is, the 10th house it's almost like the north and south node. The 10th house is where you're going. That's your face to the world. That's you get dressed and you open the doors and you step outside, and that's the 10th house. It's what people see, and it is how you make your mark on the world, your achievements, your position in society, and a lot of time your career.
Yes.
And your dominant parent as well.
Yes. So it frequently is you in the public domain, how you are, what your reputation is, and what people know about you before they've even met you, because this is where celebrities always have planets in here, because we know who they are. We know who Tina Turner was and all the rest of it. But we don't know her, but that's the sort of thing.
We know what she wanted us to know about her, or what her publicists wanted us to know.
Exactly. Yeah. So the point is that at work, if you are in a job or you've got a career, whatever that sign is on the midheaven is going to show the sort of work you're supposed to be doing, the sort of career you should go into, and how well you will perform in it when you've got planets in the 10th house as well.
Yeah, totally.
So it's very much because it's the final angular house, where the first one was you, and then the 4th is your home base, where you're coming from, your home technically, and then your partner. This is now your career. And many people only really resonate with these 4 things because it's all about you. It's your home where you go, your marriage and your work. Yeah. And if you're not particularly evolved, you won't actually gravitate to further depths into the chart. So that's an interesting thing too.
Right. And we'll talk about this more when we have our future podcasts about the succedent and cadent houses, because those are much more in the shadow. These are the houses these are front and center in the chart. And these are the houses that are going to be, much more active.
Yeah, you've got access to this energy already. Any planets in these angular houses, they're powerful planets.
Absolutely, and the meanings of them really represent that. Like compared to something like if you contrast the 10th house with the 9th house, the 9th house is about faraway lands and travel and education and study and
the nice to haves.
Yeah. But definitely not an out there professional sort of like face to the world sort of
your
energy.
reputation. Yeah. Okay, so again, if you have planets in your 10th house, they are representative of the types of careers you could have.
Yeah.
And the types of things that you're known for in the public domain.
Yeah.
And where your energies are flowing there as well.
That's that objective statement on your resume.
Anything, on your resume is definitely a 10th house.
Your LinkedIn profile.
Your LinkedIn is so 10th house.
So 10th house.
So because you're saying there, executive blah blah blah.
Yeah. And if you have nothing in the 10th house, you're like, wait a minute, LinkedIn. What is that?
What's LinkedIn? Yeah.
I wish I. Yeah.
So if we're looking at the midheaven, it's a very powerful point in the chart, second to the ascendant, and the sign on there is going to say a lot about your actual how you present into the world and your reputation, your business card, and so on. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about your midheaven?
Well, my midheaven is in Leo.
Go Leo. There's nothing wrong with Leo.
Nothing at all. No, I love the Leo. But all of my planets in the 10th house are in Virgo. And
interesting.
It is.
But they're still there.
Yeah. They're there. Yeah, absolutely. Starting out with my Mercury, which is like just in the first degree of Mercury.
Right.
Just barely inched into Virgo. I could have been born with Mercury and Leo, and that would have been like a whole different ballgame.
Yes.
But instead, there it is, conjunct my sun in Virgo, and then also my moon in Virgo. They're all in the 10th house.
So what you think about, what you want, and what you feel are all the same.
Yep.
And writing, what you need.
Editing, communicating, all
the
that
whole
stuff.
thing. And here we are talking podcasts again, public domain.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we've both got strong Mercuries, you see, so that's why that's coming through. But would you say that these planets are representative, perhaps even looking back in your past, to the types of careers that you've gone for?
For sure.
Or are they mainly Mercury careers that you've had?
Very, very Mercury careers.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, my hobbies have been much more Leo representative. If you want to talk about the art and the burlesque.
But you see now that burlesque thing is very Leo, and it's public domain. You go out there on the stage in your costume
with a fake name,
with your stage name.
That's right, stage name. Exactly.
And you go in public and doing some exotic dancing, if that's what we can say.
Well, I wouldn't say exotic. That has connotations, but yeah, it's
okay.
It's definitely stagey and it's performative and
dramatic.
It's Halloweeny and dramatic, and there's characters and there's craziness. This last one was we were a chorus line of bat flapper girls because it's Halloween theme. And before that, we were garden nymphs in the spring.
And you're tapping into this public domain. That's your sun going out there for sure.
Yeah. But do I do that as for a living? No. For a living, I do my Virgo stuff.
You do your Virgo stuff.
My words.
Your editing.
Editing other people's words, making everything perfect.
Right. Yeah, that's
and communicating about astrology and educating the people who are curious about astrology
through conversations, which
through
is
research, and through collating information into something concise and presentable and fun and interesting.
And you've got such an extensive library. I mean, you must have hit the 1,000 books at home thing, and I have a home library long ago.
Of course, my books are all organized by color, which is just
of course they are.
A whole nother thing.
That's Virgo. So I've whittled down, but it's but in general, we would assume that the career path that you've taken, because you have 3 planets there, they're going to all have something to say about your career. And I know you've said to me, particularly about the moon, that you want to find a place that you like and you feel at home in.
God. Yeah.
You don't want to just work in some stuffy office or flipping burgers. You want something where you're at home.
Appreciated.
Yeah, where you feel something.
Yeah, absolutely. Working with wonderful people and helping, being of service.
Needs and wants. And so it's a very interesting combination.
And your 10th house.
Oh, it's Aries, but there's no planets in there.
Interesting.
So it's very much, it took me a long time to tap into that. I worked in the corporate world for many, many years when I was younger. But then recently, once the family grew up, I was able to step into my own entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And there's just been no stopping me since I started it.
Kidding.
I don't just do astrology. I have 2 other things on the side.
Selling art, publishing books.
The art, the crochet, it's all It's all a huge creative outlet that is just coming forward. And because it's Aries, I don't want a boss.
Yeah.
I will bow if I have to, but I don't want a boss. I know exactly what I'm doing. I don't need a partner. I'm quite happy waking up knowing exactly what I'm going to do next, which blog post is going out, where we're going to do it, doing a podcast, putting it forward. This is how we're doing it. And
if I dare say, this is what makes us such great partners too, because I love that about you. I love the fact that you always know what's happening. And I'm just like, I'm really happy to be the second in command.
Well, this is great. It's a good old Virgo.
It's a good old Virgo.
Because
I'll make it work. You'll tell me the topic. I'll come with the research.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And not only that, we couldn't do it with 2 Leos.
Oh,
I couldn't get back at no. I don't want to say it's my way or the highway, but I know I have got this vision, this creative vision that I'm trying to bring forth through this midheaven.
Yeah. And I'm very happy to perfect someone else's vision or to bring...
be a good lieutenant, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. God, if I had to be the one with all the ideas, that would not... No.
And yet, and
I have ideas, but I don't want to be the...
Yeah.
No.
This is it. With it being the Aries, I'm quite happy being the entrepreneur, and I'll make decisions, this and that, on the spur of the moment, what I'm going to do, what I'm not going to do, how I'm going to manage things, and what we're cutting out, which is often has to be done too, because it's not really time management now, it's energy management.
Yeah.
How much energy have I got each day to put into all my projects, and some things just get chopped.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And I don't have to say, I think I'm going to cut this out. Oh, there's a big debate. No debate.
Yeah.
That's the end of it. It's gone.
Yeah.
And I'll just delete the whole thing.
Yeah.
And, but I enjoy what I'm doing, and I'm enjoying being able to put out my message. Let's put it that way. I'm not trying to change the world. I'm just trying to share, what I know on 3 particular prongs.
Very much what Aries, the personal experience. It's not...
It's not for everyone.
No, exactly. And it's funny, you don't mince words about like which signs you're not friends with, which signs have never come to you as clients, which is hilarious. And I love that about you. But yeah, it's like, no, not everyone is going to like this.
No.
And that's okay.
That's right. And if you're looking for a different type of energy coming through in your podcast or your astrology readings, you'll find somebody who does it. Yeah. The one who drones on, and then the other one who just... little mouse people. No, I do it in full color, and that's it. Chop and changing. So that's how I'm expressing that midheaven. But it wasn't always the case. As I was bringing up my family, I really didn't have a career. I was a housewife for a long time.
Yeah, interesting with all the stuff in the 4th house versus the 10th.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's a story for another day. But the point is that I didn't come into my own career really until later. Yeah. So. Yeah, it's there, and now that I'm leaning in, it's great. So I'm quite happy about that.
Another interesting, just on the topic of, because it's not always going to be our examples. We've got a couple other episodes which you can find in our library where we talk about the 10th house. I've got an interview with my partner, Roger, about his Mars in Leo in the 10th house. So if you wanted to learn about that.
Yes, I can put a link back to that. Yeah,
absolutely. And then I've also interviewed my mother, who has Saturn transiting her north node in Pisces in the 10th house. And we talk a lot about the 10th house there. So if you're curious about the 10th house, we've got a ton of content about that.
And the links are going to be below the podcast. So you just slide down to the show notes and you'll be able to go straight through.
Absolutely.
Because, these angular houses are the ones we live in.
Yeah.
We're doing us, we're doing home, we're doing partner, and we're doing work. Yeah. And everyone's doing that every day.
Yeah.
The rest is kind of jam on the bread, if you will.
For sure. And we will definitely, we have all the time in the world. We're going to do more podcasts about all these different placements. But the 10th house is a super interesting one because it's just, you see it. It's a very great...
You can't hide it.
No, it's a great conversation to have with anybody because what is in your 10th house is what people see. Yes. And it's very easy to talk about because it's like, oh yeah, that resonates. It's not like, oh, well, I've got something in the 8th house and I'm scared to talk about it. Does that mean how I'm going to die? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. No, 10th house, it's like it's what the world sees.
And I do think 10th house, too, is not only the main career, say you're a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, but if you are an independent business owner, which is very common now, a solopreneur, call it what you will, creative.
Cultural creative.
Yeah, the creator economy. Right. This is coming, that is in your 10th house. So whatever planets you've got there, you can lean into them to grow that small side business, The statistics are saying that this is how the shift is coming.
Yeah.
People are not working at Ford anymore for 40 years. They're doing their own thing in their speciality area and providing speciality services and knowledge. So that is 10th house too. So if you do have planets in your 10th house, lean into them and get that to make sure that you're tapping into these energies because they're there.
And if you don't, look at what's on the cusp of it. Look at what that rules and see where that is in your chart.
That's right. If you've got the empty 10th house, in my case, Mars is the ruler in the 3rd house.
It doesn't mean you won't be running your own podcast.
I tell you, it's like, who thought this was the brilliant idea? But here we are, and I thought blogging was great till we got onto this. But anyway, so that's the 10th house.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for getting to be still listening at this point. This is great. We really appreciate you. And certainly if you feel that this episode had some value for you, please feel free to share it with anybody who would be interested, all of your astrology friends, and let them know about our podcast. We would truly appreciate that. And so from me and Arwynne, we're going to say thank you so much.
Thank you. And if you have any interesting stories about your angular houses that you want to share with us, you can go to Starzology.com, look for the little microphone in the bottom right corner, and leave us a message.
Leave us a message. Absolutely. That could be an audio message, or you can email us at starzology@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks for being with us again, Arwynne.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for getting this far through the episode. I just want to take a moment to tell you about the two main options of my astrology services. So the first one is coaching. If you are an aspiring astrologer, and by that I mean someone who's perhaps a hobbyist astrologer or someone who's learning astrology or a student, or you've got a few books and you've been doing it for a while, but perhaps you need a little bit of help to bring it all together, then maybe getting some astrological coaching from me would be the answer for you. The astrology coaching I offer is a 1-hour session on Zoom, and it's tailored to answer your particular questions. For example, if you have issues with natal chart readings, we can go there. Or if you're having problems working with your forecasting, we can go there. Or even basic astrology stuff, or even getting yourself organized for your astrology business. The idea is that astrological coaching will answer your particular questions. It's tailored specifically to you and where you are in your astrological journey. And I'm happy to help you out with some guidance about how you can get going, what to focus on, and what to dismiss. So that would be the astrological coaching for people trying to learn astrology. The second astrological service I offer is consultations. So this is for someone who perhaps doesn't know anything about astrology, but they just want to have their chart read or get their chart done. Call it what you will. So once more, this is a 1-hour consultation over Zoom. I will interpret your chart, tell you about the main features, tell you about where the energy is flowing, and all the rest of what is entailed in a thorough natal chart interpretation. I can also add in some forecasting in there too, bearing in mind we only have 1 hour. So just in summary, I've got coaching for people who want to learn astrology, and I've got consultations for those who want to get an astrology reading done. I'm Alison Price from Starzology.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.